and that brings up a question. I myself, I'm not a trader. I don't pretend to be a trader, but I dabble. And I have a day job here at Real Vision, and I'm fortunate enough that it involves talking to traders, talking to investors, following the market. And so in a sense, my day job is related to a lot of the things that a hedge fund or portfolio manager has to do.
Yeah.
But there are people out there, I'm sure a lot of our subscribers, who don't do this for their day job, but still are trying to manage their own money and to trade the markets. And I think I'd love to hear, you speak to the difficulty of having a day job, which you're super focused to, and trying to compete, trying to outperform, the major indices when you're not devoting, full-time effort to trading and to finance. It seems to me that it's something, even in my own experience with all of this knowledge that I have here at Real Vision, it seems like something that's almost an insurmountable effort. And any trader who it's not their day job who's able to succeed, I have tremendous respect for, and I assume that they must be some of those naturals that you're talking about, because there really isn't enough time in the day.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would advise to don't lose hope, and that's not the right mindset. I don't think it's impossible to make money in the markets if you're not a professional and doing it every day, because there's so much volatility. There's so much money. There's so much movement, and you're coming at it with fresh eyes. One of the things that's a real disadvantage, and it's part of the reason why I'm trying to broaden the client base with which I work, is you become very insular. If you're working inside a very narrow space, there's an old saying in academia, Carol Gilligan, who's a professor at Harvard in women's studies, said that theory blinds observation. Theory blinds observation. The idea being, when you have a worldview as a belief system, it filters out a lot of opportunity. And so institutional investors, insiders on Wall Street, have a particular mindset, but it's really valuable to be able to come at the markets with fresh eyes as an outsider. And sometimes that vantage point is a really valuable. Think of the movie and the book Moneyball. Michael Lewis, right? Moneyball, right? You come at the game of baseball, 100 years of tradition, with fresh eyes and analytics, and you impose this process on the game. All of a sudden, it becomes more efficient. I think having an outsider's perspective is extremely valuable. In fact, me, for instance, when I came into golf, I knew a bit about golf. My father grew up playing golf, but I was an academic. And I came at the game from a theoretical perspective that just wasn't being applied to golf. It started getting results really quickly, and I was an outsider. And so if you're an investor, but not a professional investor, and you're managing your own money, there are some things you do have to be careful of. So while there's a lot of money in the market, there's a lot of ways to make money in the market. And I know people who do this and have a strategy and a differentiated view, and they make money. But what you have to be careful of is when you're on your own, you don't have the reference points to tell. You can't triangulate. You don't have the collective view. And sell side, I guess you can get the documents. So it's easy to get to miss the elephant in the room, as it were. The other thing you have to be careful of is the crises of confidence. It's easy to lose confidence when you're alone. There's this insight out of religious circles where they say that God will never give you anything that you cannot handle. And the argument I heard from this theologist was, that's not true. God gives people a lot of things they can't handle. Life is really, really hard. But God will never give you anything that you as a community can't handle. In other words, distributed suffering, shared concern. So if you're at home and you're trading alone, it's easy to get lost in your own head and panic and capitulate, and that's where you blow up your money, because it's your money. But when you have a community of people to rely on, to go for a walk with, Lev Vygotsky, the Russian psychologist, talked about the synthetic function of language. The idea being that if we have a thought partner, Crick and Watson, who discovered the structure of DNA. As the story goes, individually, they were both very average scientists, but together, they were brilliant, right? The collective. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick got fired from the Cleveland Browns. Tom Brady was not a good college quarterback. Together, there's genius. And so the one thing I always try to encourage people to do is to make sure you have good sounding boards, what I call good mirrors. That's why individual sports like golf have become team concepts. So there's no longer an individual golfer. It's the golfer with his coach and caddy and sports psychologist and wife and agent. It's like a team thing because you're bouncing ideas off people and all of a sudden triangulating ideas. So if you're an investor at home, even though it's you versus the markets, it's important to have a thought partner, which is sometimes the role that I play, or a colleague or a friend who's in the industry so you can bounce ideas off so you never go too far down a bad path.
And that actually brings up another question about the difference in psychology between managing your own money and managing money on behalf of like a fund, a hedge fund. It's not your money.
Yeah.
And there's a completely different psychological connection between, some nest egg that you've built up over years and years and years of your effort versus, a $500 million portfolio that Steve Cohen hands you fresh out of college.
Yeah.
It's a really different experience, and I'd love to hear your take on what the difference is between maybe somebody who's managing their own money and somebody who's doing it professionally on behalf of other people.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the foundational features in achievement, performance psychology and achievement domains is you have to know your why. And I just wrote this about Kobe Bryant. Kobe knew his why. All the great ones know their why. Right? So why are you doing what you're doing? And what you come to find is people tend to bifurcate on that question. Sometimes the why is for myself, Ayn Rand objectivism, right? The individual, Adam Smith in the markets, right? In Wealth of Nations, participate in the markets in your own best interest, and through that competitiveness, it escalates competition and productivity. And then there's the other mindset, and this is shifted really in the NFL. It's play for your teammates, play for others. And what we've come to find out is that when you're playing for someone else, instead of just yourself, we learned this with the Dream Team in the NBA for the Olympics. You had 5 of the best individual players in the world on the USA team, and we got beat by worst team because there's no team mentality. It was everyone playing for themselves, and it ruined the team. So the question becomes, you're investing your own money versus investing money on behalf of other people's, but that changes the why, right? And so what I'm always fascinated by, and this is what good leaders like Steve Cohen, like a Ken Griffin do, is they make people want to succeed for them. So the way I think about it is an antinomy. Even though it's a bifurcation, you're either doing it for yourself or doing it for others, the reality is it should be a blending of both, right? Urban Meyer, the historically great college football coach who just left Ohio State, has a great saying. He says, do your job, take care of yourself, and take care of your teammates. And what he's saying is you can't help your teammates if you're not doing your job. But if you're the offensive lineman and you knock somebody down, then go look for someone else to knock down. But take care of your business first. And so I think the best dynamic, or the best way to think about it, is you go from managing your own money. When you're managing your own money, you're not responsible for someone else. So it's your loss alone. What I found is when you start taking other people's money, one would think that there's a freedom that comes with that because, hey, it's house money. It's Steve Cohen's money. It's Ken Griffin's money, not my money. That's not what happens in real life. In real life, what happens is you care about people because we're all human. And if someone's willing to trust you and give you their money, there's that next level of responsibility. And if you're managing institutional money, this is families' money, these are retirement money, there's another level of responsibility. So I've found, ironically, really, paradoxically, that there's a heavier burden when you're managing other people's money than your own. You would think it'd be the opposite because you would think it's house money, so they don't care. It's the opposite. People managing institutional money have such a burden. And therein lies the psychology, because when you think that, hey, I just lost $20 million, and this is meaningful money to people. These people are on the hook. They trusted me and gave me their money. And I'm going to have to sort of give half of it back knowing that they trusted me. That's real burden, real responsibility. And I think that having a psychology to handle that is excessively important.